In the last episode, I made a claim that I think is worth holding on to. Connected intelligence is not a technology project. It's actually an operating model. And that distinction really matters because the way that most multifamily organizations approach capability building starts and ends with tools. You find the right platform, you deploy it, and you move on. And that approach has produced something predictable: a tech stack that grows, seams that multiply, and intelligence that stays fragmented no matter how much software sits on top of it. So today I want to get practical, not about which tools to buy, about how to think differently about your organization and what it actually needs. So let's pull on that thread. I'm Mike Brewer, and this is The Intelligence Fabric, a podcast about how intelligence shows up. Think about the last time you pulled a muscle. Not the big ones, not your back going out or tearing an ACL, a small one, deep in your shoulder, maybe in your hip, maybe in your calf, like me when I was training for a marathon recently. Something you didn't even know about until it was there. Didn't work anymore. Couldn't lift your arm, couldn't turn without wincing. And the weird part is that every muscle around that issue felt fine, felt healthy, felt strong. But the tissue connecting them had failed. And suddenly, nothing worked the way it normally did. That's your tech stack right now. And nobody's talking about the tissue. Here's an all too familiar pattern. A problem comes up, somebody evaluates a vendor, a tool gets purchased, everybody gets trained, and the problem seems to improve. But 6 months later, a different problem shows up in a different function, and the cycle repeats. And over time, you accumulate a bunch of tools, each one solving a problem, a real problem in your organization, each one adding a new data source, a new interface, and a new workflow that everybody has to learn and get familiar with and be disciplined about using. And the feeling of fragmentation never goes away because the tools actually solve these localized problems, and the problems that actually limit your performance aren't local. They live between functions in this space between that we've talked about before, between the moment a decision gets made and the moment its consequences become visible. That space in between. No tool purchased in isolation closes that gap. Let's think about it from a revenue management perspective. Think about what happens, say, when pricing adjusts on a Tuesday afternoon. The logic seems sound. The yield optimization in the tool itself is doing its job. But does the leasing team know why rents shifted before they come in tomorrow morning and start selling apartments, start fielding calls, start fielding leads? Does anyone connect that pricing move to renewal conversations that are going to happen 30, 60, 90 days down the road? Can anybody see whether the optimization is creating downstream impact or downstream consequences that may cost more than it's saved? The tool is actually doing its job. The context around the tool stayed invisible. And invisible context is where performance quietly erodes. This is the tissue problem. Your organs are impressive. Your revenue management system, your CRM, your PMS, your marketing automation, individually, these things are very strong, technically functional in isolation. But without a connective tissue, the systems can't coordinate. They can't transfer a signal. They can't make the output of one function intelligible to the other. The investment in organs or platforms keeps growing. The investment in tissue barely even exists. So here's what changes. And it's not the answer that most people expect. You have to stop asking the question, what tool solves this problem? And start asking, what does this function need to know about every other function in order to make better decisions? The first question always leads to buying more tools, potentially buying more tools, or asking your supplier partners to build more tools. The second leads to an architecture or an operating system or a way of doing business. And architecture is what most multifamily organizations have never deliberately built for intelligence. So I want to give you three questions that will help you surface the tissue problem in your organization. This is before you go through another demo, before you go through another integration project, before you scope something out. I want you to ask three things about your current environment. Where does understanding your organization actually stall out? And which decisions actually carry the most downstream consequence? And then if something goes wrong, how long does it take to reconstruct? If the answer is days or weeks, you're running on forensic intelligence. You're spending a lot of time in your organization surfacing the information that you need to make informed decisions. You're reconstructing the past instead of thinking about the future or creating strategy to go out and create optimal outcomes in your organization. These three questions will surface your tissue problem faster than any vendor conversation possibly can. Look, I think that most operators have heavily invested in the right tools. The organs, in other words, are very solid. The work now is stitching. It's actually bringing a connective layer and putting it in place that preserves the context as work moves across functions in your organization. It makes the cause of an outcome visible at the very same time that the outcome actually happens. When that layer exists, decisions might slow down slightly, but in the best possible way, because the people making the decisions finally have more of a full picture of reality. And the outcomes become more predictable because the system is no longer operating in fragments. So let's bring this thread to a close. The small muscle in your shoulder, the one you didn't know existed until it failed, it was never the strongest part of your body. It was never the most impressive, but it was the part that made everything else work together. Your tech stack doesn't need another organ. It needs the tissue that makes the organs a body. Build that, and you'll build something your competitors can't replicate by purchasing another software. So I want to leave you with some encouragement. This week, walk through one decision chain in your portfolio, pricing to leasing to renewals. Follow the context and see where it disappears. That's your tissue problem. That's your Monday morning. That's it for the Intelligence Fabric for today. If something resonates with you, pay attention. And I'll see you in the next episode where we'll pull another thread in multifamily. Thank you for watching.